So, welcome everybody to this warm-up event for Content Rising, where we are absolutely delighted to welcome the team from Q Wakehurst, which is our incredible venue for Content Rising. And we've got some amazing people joining us for this session to talk about Q Wakehurst and share a bit more of what's going on there. There's a lot of magic happening in those gardens. So yeah, they're going to share some of that with us. Over the last year, we've been planning. We've been planning Content Rising, Charlie and I, and holding in our mind, in our imagination, this vision of bringing people together at this venue, because Marilena and the team at Wakehurst were some of the first people to really hear what we wanted to do with Content Rising and immediately get it and say, yes, come and do that here at these gardens. It's the right place to be doing an event like this. So so we've spent a lot of time there exploring the space, hearing the stories, and getting more and more inspired as we've done that. And so we just really wanted to share that with everybody ahead of our gathering there in person next week on the 12th of June. So we'll be hearing first of all from Marilena Rayner, who's the head of marketing and strategic communications at Q Wakehurst. And she and her team of fellow amazing people from the gardens are going to set out some of the opportunities and the challenges maybe of communicating about a place like Wakehurst. So without further ado, I will hand over to Marilena to get the ball rolling. Over to you, Marilena.
Thank you, Tamsin, and hello everyone. And just to preamble it, we're really excited to have Content Rising at Wakehurst next week and delighted to be supporting it. And it's been fabulous seeing the panel come together and the groundswell of people being excited about coming. So I've been charged with being in control of the presentation, so I'm sorry in advance if I make any mistakes or there's any tech issues, bear with me. But like a true marketer, I'm going to start this talk with a couple of questions for you, our esteemed audience. It's always good to do a bit of market research. However, I know that there's some Q colleagues listening in today, which is great, but perhaps you don't need to answer these because you are well initiated and you'll skew my results. So first up, in the chat, and someone's going to have to tell me what all of this says because I can't see the chat, now is this going to work? Next slide. Oh no, not this one yet. Sorry. Take the pop quiz down. First question is in the chat. Oh, I can't get rid of it. I can't. There we go. In the chat, where is this? What is it? And Tamsin, if you could shout out what the majority of the answers are. Well, you're on mute.
Let us have your answers in the chat. So we've got the Palm House at Kew Gardens, the Seed Bank, Kew Palm House, Kew Gardens, the Greenhouse at Kew Gardens, Kew Palm House, Kew Palm House.
Right, getting a picture. That's great. Now, please pop up. Let's put some stats to this. So it's great to just get a little bit of literals. Let's put some stats to it, please, Charlie, if you can pop up the quiz now. Have you popped that up?
Just
there it is. So a few questions here, and just to get some stats really and start seeing the bar graphs. So before today's event, had you heard about Kew Gardens? What about Wakehurst? Have you heard about Wakehurst? And what about the Millennium Seed Bank? Before today, had you heard about this? Hopefully this isn't going to massively fail, and maybe because you're all brilliant environmental communicators, it might. And did you know that the seed bank was at Wakehurst?
So just we've got a couple more people to hear from. But I guess Kew people might be excluding, so maybe we're there.
So I think because you're such a well-initiated and knowledgeable audience, you already know a bit more about Wakehurst than the average member of public and wider audience that we're trying to attract. There's a couple of no's for Wakehurst though, so that's maybe a bit representative, and no's for the Millennium Seed Bank. And not understanding the seed bank is at Wakehurst. But what you'll see in a minute and hopefully start to get a picture of is that the words Royal Botanic Gardens Kew and the name Kew Gardens is synonymous with this, with the palm house, with my quiz keeps coming up. With the beautiful gardens in Richmond, the place that was originally called the Pleasure Gardens, and the Palm House, and the pretty ornamental planting. But today we're working hard across the organisation, across the whole of Kew, to shift perceptions from being just a pretty garden to being a really important science organisation. And within that, we're trying to shift our understanding that Kew also has a second site, because not as many people do know that, and that second site is us, Wakehurst, the wilder, bigger sister. And so we've been working for a while to do that through a number of projects and a number of campaigns. You might not know, but there are 350 scientists at Kew working on environmental change and projects that look to protect plants and fungi. And whilst the dial is changing of people's understanding of who we are and what our purpose is, it's not fast enough. So here's the market research that we undertake on an annual basis that measures unprompted awareness, which means we ask people, can you tell us some organisations that focus on science and nature, and organisations that focus on plants and fungi, or an organisation where it's a garden to visit and a nice day out. And as you can see, compared to other organisations like the World Wildlife Fund or Greenpeace or the National Trust, can you see my cursor if I move it around? Yeah, so you can see the indicators are really high for science and nature from public perception, but for RBGQ, Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, it's really low. However, it's really high for a day out. But the dial is shifting slowly, as you can see at the bottom here. People are becoming more aware about our purposeful intention to save plants and fungi, but still the science and nature conservation is very low. So those are the areas that we really want to make a shift in terms of supporting nature-based solutions for conservation. And at Wakehurst, the picture is a little bit trickier again. So even in our own region of the southeast, 70% of people are not aware that Wakehurst exists, that is part of the Kew family, or that the Millennium Seed Bank is here and part of Kew. And we know that of those people surveyed, 55% said it would make a difference to them visiting and engaging with our work. And for context, 95% of the people in that region do know about Kew Gardens. So you can see where the weight of the brand equity is and what Wakehurst needs to do to shift it. Much of our issues and our understanding is due to our National Trust beginnings and a continued relationship we have with them, which is a really positive one because we allow National Trust members in for free, but we do charge parking, and that becomes a bit of a bane of our lives as we get quite a lot of complaints about that from our esteemed National Trust audience. But it does mean that we have a really great channel of communications through the National Trust partnership. And issues like our name and the heritage of our name, Wakehurst Place is what we were originally called, we shifted to Wakehurst, means that we're just immediately associated with the National Trust and not Kew. So we are looking to change that in the coming years. And so why does this matter? Well, as an organisation, we're halfway through a manifesto for change, which is our corporate priorities and our mission, where we're pledging to support creating a world where plants and fungi are protected. Because if all plant life stops, all life stops. But at Kew, we're using our scientific expertise, as I said, 350 scientists across the organisation, to prove why biodiversity is vital and show that by unlocking the power of plants and fungi, we'll safeguard the future of food, medicine, clean air, and slow the climate crisis. And you're going to hear from two scientists today talking about certain projects at Wakehurst and across Kew. So if people don't know this, if people don't understand our purpose and our mission, then our expertise to influence policy change at the heart of where it matters won't have any cut through. So that's one of our biggest challenges, really, is to get people to understand that Kew isn't just one pretty garden in Richmond. For a start, it's two gorgeous gardens, but also, quite critically, a huge body of experts trying to make change in a purposeful, meaningful way through policy, but also connecting people to nature and helping to improve the community's well-being. So we need to do more to support that impact. So you are all our brilliant communicators, a gathering of the UK's most celebrated experienced communicators in this marketplace. So whilst watching this, we'd love to have your opinion about what else we can do to shift the dial. And at the end of the presentation, we'd like to hear from you. What would you do to shift the dial? How would you describe Kew and Wakehurst, like the whole organisation, or also just Wakehurst? Or how else would you bring our audiences on the journey to protect nature and help us deliver our mission together? And as I said today, you're going to hear what our response is as a garden within Kew and our response to the Manifesto Pledge, how we're working in partnership to transform our diverse landscapes into a living laboratory, how we want to work to showcase the science that's thriving in every corner of the garden, and to connect our members, our visitors, our general wider public to not only enjoy the beauty of nature, but understand the importance of it. It's only, as you know, in the real connection to nature and understanding its importance that you then want to protect it. But before I hand over to Eleanor, who is first in line, I'm just going to let you hear from these people here, because it's not just us saying this. We've got some incredible champions and ambassadors who are also helping us.
I'm Kate Blanchett, and I am delighted to be the inaugural ambassador for Wakehurst, Kew's wild botanic garden in the heart of Sussex.
I'm Dr. Amir Khan.
I am Megan McCubbin.
Me and Megan were over the moon to be first champions for Wakehurst.
Wakehurst is one of the most biodiverse places on the planet, a living laboratory across 535 acres, where science-based solutions to some of the most pressing challenges we face are being discovered.
We're losing species at an unprecedented rate, and the world's climate is changing rapidly. Wakehurst is a scientific playground to understand the importance of trees, plants, fungi when it comes to making our planet more resilient.
I'm particularly excited about the work of the Millennium Seed Bank. This insurance policy against extinction is a beacon of hope and international cooperation at a time when we've never needed it more. But Wakehurst is also just a beautiful place to lose yourself in nature.
I'm a passionate believer in nature on prescription. That's why I'm supporting Wakehurst's cutting-edge research on nature connectedness. Scientists are using these landscapes to gather data on how nature positively impacts our well-being, stress and anxiety levels. And there are more projects that everyone can take part in to explore how nature really is a healer.
We need nature now more than ever, and it needs us too.
Together, we want to inspire you to come and connect with the natural world.
And spread the word about this unique, stunning landscape that can positively impact the lives of us all. So come and visit.
Oh, no, hold on a second, people. I had this issue earlier where I couldn't move it along, but I can now. Over to you, Eleanor. No, there we go.
Thanks, Marilena. Hi, everybody. I'm Eleanor Bremen, and I work here at the Millennium Seed Bank, and I am managing a global plant conservation partnership, providing seeds of hope. So I'm going to give you an introduction to the Seed Bank and the work of the Millennium Seed Bank partnership, but also a little bit of the different ways that we're trying to engage with our multiple stakeholders. Thanks, Marilena. So there's a lot of plant diversity out there. At the last count, there's around 350,000 different plant species on the World Checklist for Vascular Plants. And they form many distinct and beautiful habitats around the world, of which these are a few snapshots. And the great thing for conservation is that most plants produce seeds, and most of those seeds can withstand being dried, put in an airtight container, and then stored at sub-zero temperatures. And by doing that, we can extend the lifespan of those seeds for tens to hundreds of years. And so that's really the basis of seed banking. And this kind of seed saving has been, used since the dawn of agriculture, but it wasn't really applied to wild plants until Kew started working on this in the 70s, when the kind of seed physiology department moved down to the mansion at Wakehurst. But it's amazing that by collecting the seeds from those landscapes and storing them in these kind of crazy Kilner jars and other containers, so it looks like a bizarre pantry, that you can actually capture all of that diversity from the landscape and keep it safe, ready to repopulate an area. So while the technology and the input required is relatively low tech, with a lot of science behind it, I must say, but the knowledge, skills, and data that are generated are massive, and those can go on to support ecological restoration and sustainable use. And it also means that diversity stored in those jars, or now foil packets, is readily accessible, and can be used today and for many generations to come. So at the seed bank, you can't bank everything. There isn't space, unfortunately. So we're focusing on threatened, rare, and useful plants. And for species that we hold, some of them are currently extinct in the wild, but others are being used to help with sustainable agriculture or to support ecological restoration. And this work is really important because, as this image shows, 45% of plants are threatened with extinction. And unfortunately, that statistic just seems to keep increasing every time Kew brings out a State of the World's Plant and Fungi reports. And there's a range of threats to those plants. It's land use change, so agriculture, development, it's overexploitation of species, invasive species, pollution, all of these things that are then exacerbated by climate change and other human disturbances. So the work of the seed bank's never been more important, as we heard in the previous video, and we're literally preventing species from going extinct. And to date, we've managed to bank 2.5 billion seeds from 40,000 different species from all around the world. Thanks, Marilyn. And we haven't been doing this alone. The reason we've been this successful is because we work through a global partnership. And since 2000, we've worked with 100 countries and territories to help them bank their native species diversity. And we work with a range of institutes, from those who've had no seed banking experience through to people who've been with us now for 25 years. And we try to take them all on that journey so that they improve the conditions they're storing their seeds in and work to the best of their abilities. So we have a really large training and capacity building program alongside to ensure that. And then the seeds are stored in the country of origin, and a duplicate of those collections are sent to the Millennium Seed Bank for safety backup. And with all of those, partners will enter into some kind of access and benefit sharing agreement so that what can and cannot be done with those seeds is set out in accordance with the Convention on Biological Diversity. Thanks. So at any one time, we'll have between 40 and 50 projects active around the world. These can be bilateral or they can be huge global programs. It just depends. And at the moment, we've got 41 projects active across 27 countries. And we generate content and information around pretty much the majority of the projects that we have running. And they range from social media shorts to blogs to films. And here's a few examples. So the first one is That's Me in the Arctic. So if you want to find out more about what I get up to in the Arctic, we've got a really nice film on that, and you can look at that QR code. This is Matthew and my UK team, and if you want to see what he and the UK tree seed collecting crew have been up to, then it's that middle QR code. And then finally, if you want to see what our team in Madagascar, because you've heard that not only is there Kew, there is also Wakehurst, there is also Kew Madagascar. So we have a third site in Madagascar with over 70 staff. And yeah, they have a phenomenal time trying to get to the field to conserve their endangered species and habitats. So learn more about their work in the Global Tree Seed Bank as well through that film. So we're producing quite a lot of content to get information out there to other people. Thanks, Marilyn. Another way that we're engaging with our stakeholders is by running a lot of tours at the seed bank. We have visitors here not quite every day of the week, although sometimes it feels like that, and also a lot of school groups visiting. In fact, we get more demand for tours than we can possibly fulfill. So we teamed up with Google to create this virtual tour of behind the scenes, and you can go in and navigate your way from the outside of the building through the visitor atrium right down to our underground seed vault, which is, you know, they future-proof that. It's bomb-proof, flood-proof, radiation detectors on the roof, etc. So you can go down there and take a look at where the seeds are being stored and head into the -20 without feeling too chilly to check in on those seeds. But we've also created longer films which show kind of the journey of the seed through the seed bank in order to get to the vault. And you can see the scientists at work and what they get up to on a day-to-day basis in those films. Thanks, Marilena. So I just wanted to end by showing you this short film, which provides a good overview of the work that we're doing and the place of the MSB at Wakehurst. And it has a very nice segue at the end with some germinating seeds, which provide the link back out of the cold store to create plants, which will create landscapes. And then Ian's going to talk to you more about the landscapes at Wakehurst and how those link back to the seed bank. So thank you.
Bear with me, I'm having that issue again. Really there. It's worth mentioning as well, Eleanor, this year we're celebrating 25 years of, just done it again, the Millennium Seed Bank. So
Yeah, we've got a lot of really exciting events lined up over the rest of the year, including an amazing seedscapes journey at Wakehurst. So come and see that when you're here.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you can hear me. My name's Ian. I'm the head of landscape and horticulture here at Wakehurst, a place where I've worked for, well, too long, really, almost 40 years now. So I'm going to try and attempt the impossible now, which is to give you a virtual tour of the very beautiful landscape at Wakehurst. And I like to start presentations with a quote, and I think this is quite apt, really, for what we're talking about today. If you look the right way, you can see The Whole World is a Garden. This is Frances Hodgson Burnett, who's the author of that charming children's book, The Secret Garden. And we felt perhaps for many years Wakehurst has been one of the world's, perhaps the world's best kept secret. And as Marilena pointed out right at the very start, that's something that we want to change. We want to change the perception of Wakehurst, moving away from it being perceived perhaps as a charming garden into people thinking that it's a centre of excellence for the environment, for nature, for conservation, for science. So I thought that was a good quote just to set the scene. What I'm going to do now is just share a personal overview of why I think Wakehurst is special, and why I think it's really important that we share the story of the landscape. So to provide you with some context and setting, Wakehurst is located in the High Weald natural landscape. This is a protected landscape, fourth largest protected landscape in the UK. Wakehurst is located on the western spur. This really wonderful landscape, and it's considered to be the best preserved post-medieval landscape in Northern Europe. When I pause, Marilena's going to jump in and we'll find some, we'll synchronize as the presentation evolves. So the High Weald is, has a number of different characteristics, and what's really important to understand and what's special about Wakehurst is that all of those characteristics that shape the High Weald are found at Wakehurst. So Wakehurst encapsulates everything that's wonderful about this landscape, from the species-rich meadows that are so synonymous with Wakehurst now, to sandstone outcrops that are peppered through the valleys. These rocks are not only beautiful to look at, but they're home to very rare and threatened mosses and lichens and liverworts and ferns, and create a site of special scientific interest. And then an abundance of woodland. Wakehurst is 200 hectares in size, and about half of that is semi-natural or ancient woodland. And then all of those habitats interlaced together with a network of ancient hedgerows. Next slide. And old drovers' lanes that crisscross through the landscape. We're almost synchronizing. We're almost there.
There's a lag, I think, between me pressing, so apologies.
And then flowing all the way through Wakehurst, hydrology is such an important feature. So starting right at the top of the gardens, I have a whole network of streams that feed ponds and lakes, and they all end up in a really wonderful part of Wakehurst, the Wetlands Conservation Area. One of the best sites in Sussex for looking at dragonflies and damselflies, but really just a very tranquil landscape, a place where you can slow down and reflect as well. Oh, someone sent a little heart, that's nice. And then all of these rich variety of habitats, and that's one of the key things about Wakehurst. It's the variety of landscape that makes it special, but that variety, different habitats, supports a very rich flora and fauna, from the very rare dormice that inhabit our woodlands to the even rarer Tunbridge filmy fern that grows on the sandstone outcrops. So it's an ancient landscape. It's been shaped over many, many centuries through, it's a productive landscape, it's a cultural landscape, and we manage it in the same way that it's been managed over hundreds of years. So we still graze our meadows and our pastures. We still manage our woodlands productively to create charcoal, a sustainable product that we sell in our shop. And all of those visual features combine with the intangible features, so our memories, our emotions, our imaginations, our experiences that we have in this landscape, to give rise to a really distinctive sense of place that Wakehurst has, and this really timeless character. And that timeless character can be appreciated in all 4 seasons, starting off in spring with wonderful ground flora, bluebells, then moving through to the pastel shades of summer in the more formal walled gardens, and into the autumnal reflections of the water garden, and then ending with the wonderful winter garden that we established about 5 years ago. So that's a little canter through the character of Wakehurst, the landscape. But Wakehurst is a botanic garden. And what's really important to know about botanic gardens, what sets a botanic garden apart from the other vast array of wonderful gardens that you have in Sussex and throughout the UK. Botanic garden is all about change. The landscape of a botanic garden constantly evolving, constantly shifting, and we've been making some significant changes at Wakehurst over the last 10 years to change the perception and to really start to use the landscape as a testbed for science, to really push the boundaries of scientific horticulture, to make sure our landscape relates back to the work that Eleanor and her colleagues are doing in the seed bank, so that it really showcases Kew's conservation credentials. So we're moving away from the scene that you can see here, a picture taken about 5 years ago, very traditional outlook, moving and leaning into ecologically attuned horticulture, same landscape 5 years later with our new American prairie. What we want for Wakehurst is for our landscapes to not only be beautiful, not only to be biodiverse, not only to be teeming with really important rare collections, but more than anything, we want them to tell stories. So our American prairie is one of the biggest changes we've made in the landscape in recent years. And the reason we've made this change is because our climate is changing, and we need to change the way that we garden so that we're sort of breathing resilience into the landscape. I've just received my 1-minute warning from Charlie. Thank you. So we better move on, Marilena. So I just want to talk very briefly about our prairie that we established 4 or 5 years ago. We sowed over 100 species of prairie plants, and we augmented that with about 40,000 live plants that we put in as plug plants, Marilena.
Oh, sorry.
Here's Jack, our prairie gardener, planting just one of those 40,000 plants. Next slide. So we've moved from a landscape that I refer to as quite a soulless landscape that we had before into a really sophisticated landscape. Our new American prairie really is pushing the boundaries of horticulture. It's part of our succession planning. It's a very resilient, sustainable landscape. It weaves in our science, our horticulture, our conservation. And I want to finish with a final quote. This is by the poet Emily Dickinson. And she wrote a poem: "To make a prairie, it takes a clover and one bee. One clover and a bee and reverie. The reverie alone will do if bees are few." Now, Emily may well be a great poet, but she's clearly never made a prairie. Because if all you needed to create a prairie was reverie, everyone would be doing it. And that's a key point, because not everyone is doing it. Only Wakehurst is making these types of landscapes because it's difficult to do. And we can only do it because we have the expertise, knowledge, also the bravery, but we also have all the wonderful connections, global connections that Eleanor has spoken about. And we also have scientists who are helping us deliver these landscapes. So our new landscapes are a real collaboration and a showcase of all the expertise that we have at Wakehurst. So our landscape is moving away from being a garden and leaning in to becoming a living laboratory. And that's where I segue nicely into Phil.
Perfect. Seamless. Thank you very much, Ian. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, my name is Phil Wilkes. I'm a researcher based at Wakehurst on the Hughes Nature Unlocked programme. And as we've heard, Wakehurst means many things to many people. To a lot of people, it's a beautiful landscape full of natural beauty. But it's also a place for the Millennium Seed Bank and the Millennium Seed Bank Partnership and the work that they're doing there, the important work that they're doing there. And as Ian's just so eloquently described, it's also a place of botanic and horticultural excellence. But to me, as a landscape ecologist who has an interest in understanding how landscapes function and how this functioning can help humanity create a more sustainable future, it's an opportunity to transform this landscape into a science playground, as Megan told us all earlier. So this is a sort of a method called a living laboratory, and Kew Wakehurst Living Laboratory sits under our Nature Unlocked programme. So what is a living laboratory? It's a collaborative research space where we can bring together scientists and researchers, not only at Kew, but from other institutions or from our local community and across disciplines. And the aim is to better understand and value UK biodiversity and the ecosystem services that this biodiversity can provide to us. This also provides us with an opportunity to communicate this research that we're doing to the public. So science isn't sort of happening behind closed doors, but it's done in an open manner and in a collaborative manner, as I've said. At its heart, the living laboratory we have here at Wakehurst, you just click on there, Marilena, we have the Wakehurst Ecosystem Observatory, which, as you can see on the screen here, is a network of plots through different habitats where we can conduct our high-resolution science experiments, but also collaborate, as I've said. So why is this important? We've all probably heard of the climate crisis, and some of you may have heard of the biodiversity crisis, and how this sort of double whammy is changing our planet and how we live in it. So we often think of this impact of these crises happening in faraway places, such as tropical rainforest or remote islands, but actually we're witnessing the impacts of climate change and biodiversity crisis right here in the UK. The UK is one of the most nature depleted countries in Europe, and this makes us vulnerable to the impacts of climate and biodiversity crisis. By studying how these habitats respond to change, or how interventions can improve the capacity of these ecosystems to adapt to this change, this is key to sort of to nature recovery and enhancing the services that nature can provide to our society. So why is Wakehurst a great place for a living laboratory? I mean, we've heard quite a lot of this from Ian and Eleanor, but we're lucky to have a number of really important habitats, from ancient woodlands to rare grasslands, as well as a range of different land management techniques. We've heard about the prairie, but we also have timber production, charcoal, amenity garden space. So studying how these habitats compare in terms of their ecosystem service provision and how they interact with one another, as well as being able to study these landscapes over long periods of time, decades, hopefully centuries, will allow us scientists to understand the future of the UK countryside. We're also really lucky to have 430,000 visitors per year. So it gives us that opportunity to sort of have that two-way conversation. So we can do the science, but also communicate it to our visitors and members, and also get them involved in our citizen science projects. You click on to the next slide, please. So there are many ways to study habitats, and nothing really beats getting out into the landscape with wellies on and a tape measure. But to really capture these landscapes or habitats in their fullest requires the use of technology, and that's something we're really embracing in the Nature Unlocked programme. So from drones overhead to sensors beneath our feet, or unraveling the secrets hidden in DNA of fungi, we are embracing this sort of technological revolution. This is allowing us to do things like monitor the abundance of bees using the frequency of their wing beats, of their buzz, and how often and when they visit different tree species. or we can do things like capture different habitats with very precise 3D cameras, which allows us to estimate the amount of carbon stored in our woodlands right to the last twig, or how these forests can hold back rainwater and prevent flooding. So these instruments and technologies, many running for 24 hours a day, are allowing us to perceive our environment like we've never been able to do before. But what is the really exciting thing about this, the work we're doing under the Nature Unlocked program, is to be able to collect all this data and deploy, modern technology, artificial intelligence, machine learning. And what we're doing is creating what we're calling a data cube. So it's bringing all these different data sets together. And this will allow us to identify patterns in this data over periods of time relevant to environmental change that will allow us to pick apart the different impacts and aspects of climate change and biodiversity crisis, and allow us to design more effective mitigations to these problems. So Marilyn is now going to play to you a short video that sort of highlights some of the research themes from the Nature Unlocked program, including carbon, pollination, and nature connectedness. Thanks, Marilyn.
So when most people think of carbon, they're often thinking of tree planting, but there's so much more about carbon. And what we're doing here is investigating where that carbon sits within the landscape. So what we're doing with the drones is putting a large amounts of technology on there, and they're used to measure the landscape. And we're measuring in detail the three-dimensional structure of the trees. We're also using quite a bit of different technology to get a better understanding.
The soil is the biggest store of carbon, really. So more than the atmosphere, more than the vegetation. We're going to take the soil cores back to our lab, and then we are able to sequence the plant and the fungus together, and we will use the DNA to ID what they are.
And we're trying to understand what the flux rate is, the efflux, the amount of CO2 coming out of the soil in different habitats. Within this site, I've got these chambers, and they measure the efflux of CO2. And this one's clear because it measures what's coming out of the soil and what's being captured through photosynthesis.
Through our pollinator research, we're looking at the abundance of pollinators and the role of different habitats in providing resources available to them.
We have set up pan traps here in South Park at Wakehurst. After 24 hours, we come back and we collect what has landed in our pan traps, and we take those back to the lab. We're using this sampling to kind of get a baseline of the different pollinators that exist in this habitat.
We know the effects that the landscape has on young people, so it's really nice to have a way of measuring it. We're going to be stopping a couple of times, then just modelling to them the different ways in which you can connect with nature. And then when we get down to the habitat and they do the actual wellbeing walk, they then understand the sorts of things that they are hoping to notice, and then hopefully that will feed back into the research piece that they do at the end.
What we need to decide is actually how we make those investments, where do we make them, which parts of the landscape are the ones that are going to give us the biggest returns, maybe for carbon or for biodiversity or even for our human well-being.
Great, thanks, Marilyn. So, yeah, very quick visual summary of the science and the purpose of Nature Unlocked. And I think it also demonstrates that, we're doing all of this different science in one place. So as we've heard, functional landscapes are not only important for combating the climate and biodiversity crisis, but nature can also help us combat more human-centric crises too. Through our nature connectedness is a concept that aims to understand how humans can enhance their connection with nature through experience. This may be in situ or through digital media such as VR, and how these experiences improve our physical and mental health, as well as increasing pro-environmental behaviours. Wakehurst Living Laboratory provides an ideal venue for this type of research, be it through our members or through our school programmes. So I'm now going to hand you over to Harry, who's going to talk about the work of our participation team. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Phil. Hi everybody, my name's Harry and I run the participation team here at Wakehurst. My team works primarily with communities that are more likely to experience barriers to engaging with our work. So for example, people might experience physical barriers if you had a physical disability, or perhaps social barriers if you're from global majority groups. My team was set up 2 years ago this week actually, to support Q's ambition to extend our reach, because we know that it's really clear that access to green spaces and the heritage sector isn't equal for everybody. So my team's role is to understand how we can make the work that we do more inclusive, more accessible, and ultimately more relevant to underserved audiences. So from my perspective, when we set the team up, we had a choice in how we work. We could either create in isolation, or we could open up opportunities for people to shape and engage with our work in genuinely meaningful ways. So from day one, we saw extending our reach it couldn't possibly just mean working with people in the same way that we always did. We had to work in a new way, and that meant that we had to understand what genuinely mattered to underserved communities, and that's why the way that we've set the team up and the way that we work is really rooted in co-creation. So we design with our communities that we serve, and then many of those people that have been involved in that design process and helping to set up our community programs now help us to deliver some of those programs. So over the last 2 years, my team has worked with about 6,000 people on and off site, and many of them had never experienced or visited a botanical garden before, and some of those people were not regularly going out into nature, but now are visiting us regularly through our programs or coming on self-guided visits, which is ultimately kind of what we want as a team. So an example of this way of working is a collaboration that we did with Sussex University recently. We ran an amazing research project with an anthropologist called Karis Jade Petty, and we explored how people with a vision impairment experienced a landscape. So you saw Ian there show loads of gorgeous photos of our landscape, and it's a highly visual thing often for most people, but and of course, obviously, you know, the science team are making sure that our landscapes are biodiverse and productive too. But what is a landscape if you can't see it? You know, what if you can only experience a landscape through a sighted guide or through your touch or smell? And so this project explored those questions to help us understand how we can then design and deliver projects in the future that are more accessible and ultimately help us to kind of extend our reach and work with new audiences. So over 5 weeks, we brought a group of vision impaired participants on site, and they created a short film, which hopefully will be shared after today, artwork, poetry, and then we took a 30-minute soundscape that was created that reflected their experience to Brighton Festival as a standalone event called Nature Unseen. And that allowed people who were sighted to come and experience what it was like to be a vision impaired person at Wakehurst. But also it allowed other vision impaired people to come and experience Wakehurst without having to visit us. And so what started as a research project and as a way of understanding how we work with new audiences, it turned into a form of engagement itself. The process of doing became the content became a mode of engagement, and ultimately we were able to reach new audiences in a really genuinely kind of meaningful way, which was rooted in working with our new audiences already. So the relationships that we've established with those participants on that project continue past the project, which is what we want. We want long-term engagement with groups. So for example, those participants have come and returned to share feedback on areas of the garden that we're redesigning. They've helped contribute to our landscape management plan. And some of the insights that have come from this project and from the conversations with those people have sparked things like creating an access working group and have reignited conversations around how do we become a more accessible site. And talking of the landscape management plan, something that came out really strongly from this project was about using universal design principles, which we now incorporate into my team's work a lot. So universal design principles, things like equitable use, flexibility, intuitive design, low physical effort, all of those things help to make sure that whatever we're doing is really accessible. So an example of that would be where we've incorporated that would be Spring Into Community. That's our free community festival that's now in its second year. We welcomed about 1,000 people from underserved communities across Sussex, and we designed the activities during Spring Into Community with kind of universal design principles in mind. So, for example, there were activities that were happening over the festival that you didn't need to be able to speak English in order to engage with them, or you didn't have to be physically mobile to engage with the activities. You were able to turn up as yourself, and there would be something on offer for you to kind of engage with. And I think it's important to say that this approach of working with our community is it's not just my team that's doing it, it's Wakehurst overall. So an example of this would be when essential repairs needed to take place on the mansion, rather than treat it as a closed doors process, we used it as an opportunity to involve our visitors in the story. So an artist was invited to create a scaffolding cover, which was made up, I think, of about 1,000 different photographs of Wakehurst, which were then all stitched together into a single image, ultimately transforming what would have been probably quite an ugly scaffolding into I think it at the time was the largest outdoor art installation. And so it became more than a building project. It became a shared experience and ultimately excellent content that people were genuinely kind of connected to. Another example of this is our Trees for Bees citizen science project. So Phil just spoke about the Nature Unlocked team, and this is one of the projects that's come out of that. And the project invites the public to identify in our landscape which trees support pollinators the best. And that data will then contribute to the conservation research and also feed into things like urban planning. So, for example, what trees are going to help to keep our cities cool in our warming climate. And my team supports this work by facilitating things like community engagement days. So, for example, we reduce barriers for people that might traditionally not want to engage or not be interested in citizen science by, for example, providing the iPad so that you don't need an iPhone. We've got the iPad and we'll teach you how to use the app. We'll also take you around on the walk. So it doesn't matter if you're unfamiliar with the gardens because there's going to be someone with you the whole time. So this way of working for us is showing really excellent results. So, for example, out of those people on the community engagement days, 88% of them have never heard of citizen science, yet 94% of them want to come back again, are more confident to engage in the future. And we're already seeing people who were engaging a couple of months ago on Trees for Bees facilitated walks coming back and doing it on their own. And so with the right support, we can really open up the science to people who otherwise would not be interested, and therefore bringing more people into achieving our mission, which obviously is to, inspire people to care for plants, fungi, and the future of all life on Earth. So, for me, I think it's about making sure that we as an organisation are working collaboratively and inclusively. And when we do that, the outcomes are always much, much richer. They're more meaningful. They have more impact. And I think that way of working should shine through in our content, which I've only done one slide, which, having now seen everyone else's gorgeous slides, wish I'd done more. But in some ways, this is a nice kind of reflection of the fact that as a team that's the newest to Wakehurst and still emerging and understanding how we work with new audiences, the content that we're creating, needs to reflect that too. And I can see we're overrunning, so I'm going to move. So I'll stop talking now.
Sorry, people that have popped out. I'm sorry, we clearly have too much to say.
Yeah, well, thank you all. And I mean, I hear what you're saying, Harry. There were some very beautiful slides there, but I know really what everybody is so keen to do is actually talk to you and ask questions and reflect and share. So as a team, you've given us just so much food for thought there, and I know there's so much to say about your gardens and your landscapes, and you've just dipped your toes in really to the stories that are living there in that landscape. But we'd love to invite everybody in, and Charlie, I'll hand over to you.
Well, no, I mean that is, we've got 15 minutes for those questions. Thought we might kick off maybe. The things that I heard in that last 40 minutes were about sort of some quite things that have been a little bit of tension. And so that's stewarding the traditional landscapes and having such a unique place that needs being looked after, whilst being a living laboratory or a science playground. This sort of insurance policy for the world that is happening within the Millennium Seed Bank, the fact that it is a part of Kew Gardens, which everyone has such strong associations with, we know, and that it's a place for everyone to engage with landscapes, and that's the aspiration. So there's a lot there. And I suppose what I would be interested to maybe to start with is, from what you've heard, I mean, what speaks to you most powerfully? What would you want to say first to someone about what Wakehurst is? Would anyone like to jump into that small question? You can raise your hand, or you can drop something into the chat if you'd prefer.
And we're very happy if you want to put your camera on as well.
I think Dave.
Have you spotted someone, Marilena?
I spotted someone called Dave up on screen, but not unmute.
Dave,
Hello.
go for it.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for sharing all that info. I didn't have my hand up, but I'm happy to kick off. I was thinking, well, sort of, have you done much profiling into the kind of audience that you're trying to get to? And there's probably, if you have, there's probably more than one audience for different reasons. But I was just thinking, as a nascent radio station specializing in the environment and rock and roll, we really want to get younger listeners excited and knowledgeable and confident about their future careers, for instance. And I think via the academic, scientific side of things, if those stories, the innovations, the solutions even that you come up with can inspire a younger generation, certainly a younger generation of university students who tend to be leaders in many ways. So if I was profiling what a suggestion, then that would be it. I think I would concentrate on that link and develop your younger audience and your younger, hopefully attract younger visitors.
Brilliant. Marilena or Harry, do you want to pick that one up?
Shall I take the segmentation and profiling question, and Harry, you take the next bit? We do have a segmentation model at Kew. We used to have one that was based on people's likelihood to visit, and actually since the Manifesto for Change launched, and our increased focus on purpose rather than kind of commercial visits, we changed that to a values-based segmentation model, and so we have names like a botanical advocate, which you can expect. I suspect everyone in this space is probably going to come up as a tick in that segment category of people who are already on that journey to protecting nature. Then we have a garden enthusiast, who's someone who has a love for gardens and for nature, but perhaps isn't on that nature saving journey. We have the same for families, whereas an adventure family and a discovery family, and an adventure family is someone that goes out in nature for fun, like a Go Ape kind of day out, or that kind of association to nature, as opposed to someone who wants to just run in the meadows and really connect to nature. And then we have those that we are not reaching. So those are our probably core groups, and those that we're not reaching and we're underserving. And we do really well with families, and we reach families a lot, and we have got lots of programming that encourages families to think about their connection to nature and the importance of nature, but not when it gets to a slightly older young person. And that's where we really struggle. And that probably ranges from about age 12 right up to kind of a young audience of 20 to 25 where you want them to come as a self-initiated visit. That's Wakehurst. Kew Gardens is a different situation. They're a bit ahead of the journey and they don't have the barriers we have.
Yeah, I know. Just quickly, I noticed that a lot of that, therefore, your outreach deals with people visiting almost on a one-to-one, not on a one-to-one basis, but in person. And use of the media, as you know, can engage with hundreds and thousands of the listeners in an encouraging way. Which doesn't necessarily emphasize the aspect of coming to visit.
Harry, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so I think you're right. Yeah, the research is really clear that kind of engagement with nature can drop off a cliff at around 12, 13. And in those teenage years, it's really important to engage people in nature. And so, my team, we have a work experience program, which is for 14 to 17-year-olds to come and experience what it's like to work in the different teams across Wakehurst. And we work with young people off-site in terms of working with schools and their eco clubs. And obviously we have a huge learning team here I think they see over 10,000 young people a year that come for a facilitated visit. But I think you are right in terms of it's a group of people that we would like to engage with more. And I think, my team can play a role in that. And at the moment, what we're offering is for small kind of cohorts of people. It's really bespoke and it's really great experience. But actually, I think there's something about being able to scale up that offer and accessing those groups to understand, well, what would motivate you to engage with us, what's of interest, and what can we bring as value to your lives is a kind of journey that we're going on at the moment.
Brilliant. Thank you, Harry.
Can I propose that Branby Radio makes a series of programs about Kew?
Your pitch has been heard there.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you. Tanya in the chat says in response to this, I'd want to highlight your scientific work and how you're telling this story in an accessible way. I think we probably, many of us would agree with that, how important that is. Sarah, you've got your hand up. Would you like to ask your question or give your view?
Hello, I'm so pleased you're asking us. It's brilliant. I am overflowing with ideas. And I think first, the first side is bringing in I'll come to the children because I've got a whole gamut of ideas about that. But the first bit is about bringing in the B Corp businesses as to use it as a public place to be able to have a meeting. And I think because of the seed bank and that sense of the laboratory, playing on the idea of seeds of change and seeds of the future, there's amazing businesses for good in Sussex. And it's thinking if you had a space that businesses could come in and use, and then they'd obviously pay for that chance to do it. And there might be an outdoor boardroom space where you'd have somewhere physically outside where they could come together and have a meeting, or somewhere inside. But you almost get known in Sussex that you're the go-to place where you would go and have a meeting, like you're doing your the event next Thursday. But that's the first one and it becomes the go-to, because in Brighton we've got Projects, which is an inside meeting space in the heart of Brighton. And I think I freelance for a few different organisations, and I freelance for the South Downs National Park and Sussex Bay, and I just can see there's all this interest. And I think it's about somebody taking the lead on it and saying, you know what, we're going to make the physical space, you come to us, because all those people have got families, they've got huge spheres of influence. And I think if you were to create a physical outside space and an inside space, that could be something with your marketing that could be really juicy and fun to do to bring people in. And then the other side for kids, the Department of Education wants every school setting to have a sustainability lead by the end of 2025. Now that's massive. And then what I keep saying to my people is, gosh, then there's a point of contact in the schools, which there hasn't been up till now. And the truth is most schools are too time poor to be able to to actually do this. So I think it's about bridging the space again between the Business for Good, because they have sustainability leads in their companies, and using their volunteer days, because they all have 2 volunteer days a year. Is there any way that we can bridge the gap? And we do that as a case study in Sussex to see how we can really make sure every school setting in Sussex does have a sustainability lead, because we're going for devolution and we want stuff to be different where we live. And there's such amazing work happening in Sussex, and we need to bring young people along with what the grown-ups are doing. And I passionately think there's a massive opportunity for Sussex to be leading on this, the same way Wales is leading on the future generations, that there's a real opportunity for Sussex to be leading. And it needs a collaboration between organisations like yours, with the South Downs National Park, Wheel to Waves. It's about bringing together and people collaborating, because no one organisation can solve this, because no one's got the resources. And I really am up for, I've given it a name, I've called it Sussex Way, and this is how we do business in Sussex. But I really think that there is the scope for bringing young people along and using those sustainability leads and building a bridge. So yes, talk to me again.
Where do you work, Sarah? Where do you work? Or you volunteer? You said you volunteer.
I'm a freelancer, and I call myself a bit of a gun for hire. I come in, I do a project, and I leave.
Okay, well, like Idea Bomb. The meeting space concept is brilliant, and is something that we mooted just after, you know, with lockdown and people working from home, and the acknowledgement that a lot of people were working in Sussex rather than going off to London or Brighton, were staying in the local villages. And we mooted ideas of like huts in the landscape, Wi-Fi enabled. Ian's going to maybe get the idea of us putting up huts everywhere across the beautiful landscapes. But it's something that's still relevant now in terms of just inviting the business community in. And agree, it is an area it is a gap for us. We don't have any core business offers or ways of growing that stakeholder group. So I will take that away, and that's a really helpful nudge for us in terms of audience development and stakeholder development. And the schools oh, sorry.
Sorry, I'm really sorry to interrupt, but we are rapidly running out of time, and it's always the way that we just never have enough time for this bit of the session, because there are so many ideas. So what I wanted to say was, because we do need to stop on time for people who've got other things happening afterwards, is for those who have joined this session, and for anyone who is coming to Content Rising, our plan is to do a follow-up online gathering in September, where we can just hold a lovely big open space for sharing more of these ideas, and making sure that the people who want to talk to each other about, oh, could we try this or could we do this, have the space to connect properly and explore with a bit more space, rather than these little feedback sections at the end of like one or an hour and a quarter sessions. So yeah, so unfortunately we have to wrap up, and I can see there are ideas being dropped into the chat from people as well. So we'll make sure that we capture all of this, and we'll be sending a follow-up email. And just want to say a huge thanks to everybody who's joined this session or who are watching it on recording, the team who shared so much inspiring stuff with us, and massive thanks to Kew Wakehurst for being our brilliant venue next Thursday. And yeah, we really hope that this is just the start of a conversation and connection and making stuff happen. So yeah, without further ado, I will bid you all farewell and say thank you for your time.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks everyone. Good to see you.